Lieutenant Harper, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, sir. You and I connected earlier this year on House Bill 415. That was the firearms in schools. There is a big concern with parents nationwide, obviously, but also within Idaho about safety in schools. This 415 was not successful. They're trying to figure out, what the best way to deal with school security is. But one of the big questions is, hey, in the event of a lockdown, what actually happens? One of the big concerns parents have, obviously, is being able to connect with their children during lockdown. So that's one of the big supporting arguments for having schools and cell phone, having access to cell phones in school. Hey, if there's an emergency, I want to be able to contact my kid. That, though, although that makes me personally feel better, if there's an emergency, I want to be able to talk to one of my sons. Talking to law enforcement, they're like, that's not a good idea. You don't want to have a classroom full of kids on the phone screaming at their parents and their parents screaming back. And then you have one adult trying to get order and do the right thing. It just seems like a mess. What, if you wouldn't mind, what's the protocol for lockdowns in the state? And I know it may vary somewhat from district to district, but what's the nature of the lockdown? What are you trying to do? How would, for instance, personal technological devices factor into that, if at all? Help me understand.
So a lockdown is pretty standard. There is some variance depending on where you go, but overall, a lockdown is for when there is a threat internal to a school building. And that's sometimes where we lose track is. You'll see some schools where they'll put schools in lockdown when there's police activity in the area or something suspicious on campus or near campus. But really the lockdown, it was designed for when there is a threat or a perceived threat inside of a school or entering into a school, that threshold.
Yeah.
Really the lockdown process is pretty standard. The biggest thing is getting kids and staff, administrators, everybody out of sight, behind locked doors, in a safe and secure space. But as we train, we want to leave it options based as well, because if during a lockdown kids are near an exit and it's safe for them to make the decision that I can walk out this door and leave this campus, we want to empower them to be able to do that. But a lockdown really is designed for the threat in the school or perceived threat in the school and securing kids and staff behind locked doors out of sight and trying to keep them as quiet as possible. There's some different variations there where we really support barricades. But since West Ada specifically moved to having teachers teach behind locked classroom doors, the barricade's still an important piece because humans make errors. They leave doors unlocked or they leave them ajar or whatever it may be. The barricade adds a second layer of protection because looking historically, I have spent a lot of time trying to understand why people do these things to our most vulnerable population. But really, time is of the essence for them. They want quick available targets. And they want to cause as much destruction as possible, as quick as possible, because they know that they only have a little time to do it. So if we can remove those options and make it that much harder to access young people and or teachers or staff, we are going to increase survivability significantly. So.
Gotcha. Okay. There's a lot here. When we first spoke, you articulated a term called a reverse evacuation.
Reverse evacuation.
And that is a term indicating, so say you have kids on a playground or kids, whatever, you actually enter back into a school building, enter into a safe area that can be locked. And that becomes kind of the fortification for the kids. So instead of being out on the field or out on a playground or something like that, they go into a physical building that is then very difficult to penetrate. And you articulated, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you remember saying that the safest thing, the thing that increases the most safety in a tragic event is actually a locked classroom door. That people have not been able to actually. There are not cases where people break through the locked classroom doors, or at least it doesn't happen frequently. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. The safest place is you're not there. Altogether,
that's the safe place. Yeah,
that's the safest
sure.
spot.
Sure.
But obviously, kids are at school doing their thing. The safest place they can be is out of sight behind a locked, secured classroom door or a locked door out of sight, because it may not be a classroom, right? But I mean, and again, you can look at all the information. You can read all the after action reports from Uvalde to Columbine to you name them. Even the most, some of the most recent ones with, I think it was Georgia, goes to one classroom, is looking in, the kid won't open the door because the kid left class, goes and gets a gun, comes back, wants to get back into his or her classroom. They have a protocol where the kid has to look, make sure it's safe to let the kid back in, notices the kid's got a gun.
Okay, so the person inside the classroom is like, you have a gun, I'm not letting you back in.
Right. So ends up going to the next available classroom, which was unsecured, and is able to go in and do what happened. So again, the exact specifics are here nor there, but locked classroom doors are saving young people's lives. And, we were wondering how this program was going to go when we implemented it in the largest school district in the state. And there's challenges, right? Because young people need to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Or they got to go and meet with a counselor or whatever it may be. But teachers are smart. They're creative. They're making it work. We're seeing a lot of compliance with that when we do our lockdown drills. And it's now just becoming normal practice.
So with the implementation of this program, the protocol that you guys are talking about, so essentially walk me through that. Like what does a lockdown drill look like? What's the first step? Is it like the fire alarm goes off? Like how do people know that they're supposed to do this? And with the flexibility that you mentioned, do children have the decision-making process of electing to go back in or flee the campus? Or are they instructed like, look, if you're near a campus door, you go inside? Like walk me back through the whole process.
So some of it's age specific.
Okay.
Right? If we're talking K through 5, it may look a little different, right? Because they need a lot more supervision and direction from trusted adults.
Sure.
But when you get into middle school and high school, we really train young people to be free to make decisions and be part of helping instead of hurting the process. Sure. So a lockdown, let's say you have a suspicious person that comes into the school, is believed to be armed. It's not supposed to be there. I'm not going to get into an active shooter. I'm trying to keep it simple. This is noticed and reported back. There's some sort of notification that's sent out. Schools with more advanced technology, they have pre-recorded messages that is hit through a button or a code, and it's shouted across the mountaintops, right? Everybody hears it, which is the triggering language to go into lockdown. But some schools, if you get into our rural parts of the state, some of them have no PA systems, or they're antiquated technology. So what they'll do is they have horns or other things, notifications
yeah, sure.
That they'll send out, which when they hear that sound or they get that specific message, it triggers a specific response.
Got it.
So they hear this message go out. First thing is verifying that the door is locked. Usually there's some sort of window covering. If not, lights are out. Lights should always still go out. Student positioning is extremely important. Getting kids out of sight of any windows interior to the building. And we've really also trained to try to keep kids standing. The reason is if the door happens to be penetrated or movement needs to take place, it's that many more seconds that you're saving, keeping them standing. Also, keeping them standing reduces the footprint of the populace that are in that classroom when they're all sitting, as they say, the young people, crisscross applesauce, the young kids. Yeah. Young kids, you pretty much got to sit them down because they're too fidgety. But as you get older, even older into elementary school, keeping them standing reduces the footprint, allows them to get it against the safety corner is what we call it. And with the lights out, the doors locked, you're pretty much in a really good spot. We've really pushed also to arm teachers, and not meaning arming them with firearms, but giving them some sort of impact weapon so that if somebody does get in, they're able to defend themselves and, more importantly, the student. So baseball bats. We got a lot of baseball players. We got a lot of golfers, stuff like that.
I shouldn't laugh. That's just fun.
Right. But that's that's how we
you have to have something.
Yeah, we got to have something that if they need to defend their flock of kids in their classroom, they have the ability to do that. Now, that secondary focus of the barricade, that's a challenging one because building a barricade is noisy. It takes a little time. But if you have the capability, especially when you get into the older ages, you get people involved to help you. And it's really about making it to where if somebody is going to bust out your slot window or gain access, they're dealing with a whole lot of stuff that is refocusing the attention of why that person's trying to get in, because they no longer can just do what they want to do.
Right.
Because they're trying to fight through tables and chairs and
desks everywhere.
All that kind of stuff. So that's really what a lockdown in very general looks like in the protocol. Everybody knows it. It's no secret. For generations, we've been teaching this. This is not a new concept, but it's proven that it works.
So with the barricade idea, that it would essentially be like, okay, let's say you got a chemistry class in high school and everybody goes into instant lockdown mode. And then you have, 10 students like throwing desks and whatnot at the door to make sure that it's not that even if somebody can peer in, even if they do have the intention to come into that room, it's like, well, now you got to get through, hundreds of pounds of material and other things. And it's going to be exceedingly difficult. Like just trying to get into my kid's room when they have like Legos and stuff. It's like, I'm pushing through stuff,
right.
So that's essentially the idea that it's like, hey, we can use existing materials. This is a zero cost endeavor from a school standpoint. You don't have to like buy a new thing. It's like, just use whatever's in the room, push the teacher's desk over there and then pile up.
Yeah. And really, initially, when lockdowns first came around as a good school safety protocol, the fire department was challenged with that because you're obstructing an entry into a location if treatment's needed. But they understood that in these situations that we need to be able to provide the securest space possible. As time has gone on, companies started developing secondary locking devices. So things that go over the retractable arm, things that go into the ground and secure the door from behind. Those things are still not authorized. We still find them from time to time. Teachers will have them available. But again, until something tells us that we need to change what we're doing or how we're doing things, the way that lockdowns are functioning current day are saving people's lives without secondary locking devices. So again, a secondary locking device is great because you basically make it impossible to get in without like driving a truck through the classroom door or cutting the door out.
Right.
But again, those things can be used for harm too. If students know where they're at and they're wanting to harm other students, you put a secondary locking device in place. And now we can't get in to help those who need help inside of a class. So it's a double-edged sword.
So like a teacher may actually have, like one of those little plastic or metal wedges. It's like all you do is kick that under the door, and then it's going to make the door incredibly difficult to open.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff out there where it's actually metal.
Yeah.
And metal sleeves and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
And it's nearly impossible to get in unless somebody's helping you on the other side to move that stuff out of the way.
So this is the physical protocol of what goes down. And the idea is get out of the way, tiny footprint, be behind a locked door, the whole bit, kill the lights, kill the visibility, the whole thing. But what of students? In this point, this is where a lot of parents articulate, hey, I want to be able to connect with my kid. If my kid's, crowded into a corner and there's a real threat, a credible threat, I want access to my kid. And I understand that from a parent standpoint. Like I deeply understand that. And I would have been very inclined to want that as well. But talking to you and talking to other people, especially in the wake of House Bill 415, not in the wake, that's wrong, but in conversation about this bill, every law enforcement officer or person involved is like, that's not a good idea. Like it's a good idea from a parent standpoint. It makes you feel better. But if you're a parent who's saying, hey, I want the safest situation for my kid, you don't want your kid to be standing in a group with 29 other people talking on their phones. Help me understand this. Like what do parents that are advocates for unobstructed cell phone access in schools, especially for this, what do they need to know to help them understand, look, this is not actually the best idea?
So I'm going to try not to think with my parent hat and my law enforcement, because obviously I'm a parent of 2 school-age kids.
It's impossible. It is impossible to think about this without wanting that, right?
I know, but the thing is we understand technology is disruptive many times when we're in a educational setting. And that is where, when it comes to safety, what I ask parents is to trust in the process, trust in what the training that we're doing. We're fortunate in a lot of areas around here to have school resource officers who are on campus and are doing their thing. But when we add in outside voice that aren't involved in what's going on, it can cause confusion. It increases anxiety, fear, panic. And what we're trying to do is we're asking a group of people led by a trusted adult to be doing certain things to keep themselves safe. And if now we bring in a variable of, well, all the kids should answer their phones to talk to their parents, it makes that process very difficult. And it's very hard for that teacher or educator to be able to do what we're asking them to do on top of what we're asking the kids to do. One of the big things that I really have focused on is working with school districts to get out timely communication. It will never be fast enough, right? Because I try to think of, if I'm sitting at home as dad, like, what am I going to be thinking about? Like, how quickly do I want information? Well, in today's time, our phones, we get it like this, like, just a snap of a finger. But the biggest thing is getting out timely communication. But at the time of a significant emergency is not the time for communication. That communication should strictly be coming from law enforcement or internally working with the school district or the building administrator to get out communication. Because again, if I'm sitting at home as dad and I'm calling in, telling my child what they should or shouldn't be doing, I'm not there. I don't know exactly what's going on. So I bring in confusion because my kids are going to listen to dad.
Right.
But it may not be the right thing they should be listening to because they're in that classroom, they're in that environment. They should be using their senses and listening to others around them on what's the best decision at that moment.
Man, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's just
hard.
It's so rough to imagine that it, like, even thinking if I was on the phone with one of my kids, I'd be like, dude, get out of that, like, run home. Like, they're not going to run home, but like that would be my immediate response. Like, get out of there. It's like, get out of there when? How? Where? Which direction?
Yes.
Right? Like, do you compromise other people's safety by leaving the room? Right? Has the door, like, all of these considerations, like, no. Like, stay put or listen to whoever's there. But in a crisis like that, I could not imagine that I would be able to keep my cool even remotely.
Yeah. And again, I get it, but these things happen so fast and it's usually over pretty darn quick. So there will be time where we can reconnect parents and their children, but in a crisis moment, we need full attention, full focus by the adults and the kids to get through this and work through this problem, because we're coming, law enforcement's coming, and we're coming heavy. If we have a major school incident, you are going to see law enforcement literally falling out of the sky. They're going to come out of the trees. They're going to come up through tunnels, jokingly, but literally the response package is massive because we know that schools contain our most important populace. Our future generations are inside of these school buildings. So I think we're doing a lot of great things. I have brought people up to see what we're doing here in Idaho. Specifically, I can speak about the Treasure Valley, and people are like, wow, you guys are in maintenance mode is basically and I was like, maintenance mode? What do you mean by that? They're like, you guys are just fixing little things. Like, we're still trying to get our programs to be more
Get the
robust
big
and
thing,
get the
yeah.
buy-in, buy-in, because teachers don't say, I'm going to become a teacher so that I can defend my kids against an active shooter. That's not why they become teachers. They become teachers because they want to educate our future generations, right? And be good mentors and good people, right? And create other good people for future generations. But in today's time, now we expect them to be able to literally respond to any type of emergency and follow the protocols that they've been trained to do. So again, the technology, I understand. I support technology as long as it's smart technology, which we've had lots of conversations today about off air. But the thing is it's very disruptive for us. And like I said, trust the process, wait for timely communication, and be part of a solution. If you're in a school district where you're not getting accurate or timely communication or effective communication, like come up with solutions. Be part of solving it and making it better. Because again, in crisis, we're trying to focus on, okay, let's solve this and then let's communicate it out, right? Get that initial blast out so that parents and community members know, okay, hey, they've got it handled. Things are safe. There's going to be more information to come. So we really are supporting school districts working on template messaging so that in any type of emergency, when they go to put out information, they can pull from templates. It removes emotion. It removes inaccuracy of information being shared. And it's kind of, we got to get something out quick. And with something saying we will be sending out additional information here soon.
Gotcha.
So,
what is a mistake or something that you would say, hey, look, in a crisis moment, all bets are off. It's going to be very, very difficult to manage. But aside from just waiting, I mean, obviously you want people to wait. You want people to follow instructions. Is there something that you would say, please don't do this, right? For instance, somebody articulated to me months ago, they're like, listen, if you have a school with 600 kids in it and there's a crisis moment and the school's trying to communicate with law enforcement and you have 600, well, let's say 1,200 parents calling because mom and dad calling, all of a sudden they can't use their communication system. It would sound unbelievable to be like, hey, if there's a crisis, don't call the school. It's like how could anybody do that? You couldn't just sit around and wait. But there are large systemic problems like that where people become reactionary and then the mechanisms we have in place do not function properly because they've been overloaded, right? So is there something that you would say, hey, look, parents, you as a parent, I as a parent, right? What would you tell me if you're like, Matt, listen, if the worst should come to pass ever, and it's one of your kids, and God, I hope that never happens, but try to refrain from doing this just for like a couple minutes or like whatever it might be.
Take a deep breath. Is key number one, the best that you can.
That'd be so hard. Yeah.
But again, it first starts with, do you believe in the capabilities of your first responders to do what they're trained to do? Do you believe in the processes in place in regards to school safety? Are they doing the right things? And if you don't know, educate yourself. Go talk to your school principal, their vice principal, whoever, and ask them, what are you doing to keep my kids safe? Tell me exactly what program or what response package are you using to keep my kids safe? Because sometimes it comes down to knowledge is power. And if I'm more educated on those types of things, maybe it'll reduce my anxiety a little bit when things are going bad in or around my kid's school. One of the big problems that we historically have, because people are going to call in, but they're not answering the phone. When we're dealing with a major emergency inside of a school, we don't have a call center of people waiting for phone calls. We're dealing, and I say we because we work collectively with our schools. So when I say we, not just law enforcement, school officials and ourselves, but we're dealing with the problem. We can't be standing there answering phone calls. Probably the biggest challenge that we have when we have a major emergency at a school is parents responding to the school. They're like, I got to be at the school. And that has caused us a lot of problems, because I will put the question back over to you as a parent as well. What are you going to do when you respond to the school?
I don't know, but I already thought about that. I'm like, I won't call. I'll just drive over. Right. I'm only 6 minutes away. I might beat the police.
Right.
Like, I already had that thought. Dumb, like not just,
but it's a
God,
natural
what,
thought.
yeah, what am I going to do? I'm like, going to throw myself at somebody, or it's like, it's not, I get it. Like I already thought that.
Yeah. And that's a natural response.
Right.
I mean, that as parents,
I'm going to like go pick up my kid in the line or something. Like that's not what you're going to do.
That's not what you're going to see when you get there. But
Right.
one of the biggest challenges is we've seen this time and time again where parents will start responding to the school and they're literally parking everywhere, which is slowing down our response, our ingress, right?
Yeah, right.
Getting to the problem. And then we're trying to manage all these people that we don't know. Is this a good person? Is this a bad person? So it's slowing down our response. So what I do is try to sit on your hands and wait for direction, because we work with the schools on saying, hey, look, we're having a situation, whatever it may be. And then the follow-up information is, hey, look, we need parents to go to this location and wait for further direction. So we'll make staging locations for parents, right? Find a parking lot nearby, or we'll just tell people, stay at home and you'll start receiving phone calls. We're going to start reunifying your children with you, those types of things. But showing up at the school, it just creates a bigger problem for us, which I know their hearts are in the right place. But as first responders, we're trying to deal with an emergency situation and mitigate issues. And the last thing we want is have to be dealing with cars everywhere, parents who are going to be extremely elevated emotionally, right? Wanting answers, wanting to help, which I totally get. But sometimes what you think is helping is actually hurting us.
Right. I could just see them, like at my kids' elementary school, I guarantee you there would be a mob of dads there, armed, ready, and you as law enforcement, it's like, how do you know? Like they're not wearing the pink vest that identifies them as a friendly guy, you know, like that'd be man, that's a rough one. But again, back to what you were saying before, which is, look, consider the position, right? Just consider the position of, okay, I've now been alerted that there's a crisis. If I think the thing that would drive me to call and try to interact would be lack of awareness that the school has a plan, right? So just when you said like, hey, if you're worried about it ahead of time, get a hold of the school, find out what the protocol is, find out what the action plan is. And if you have faith in that, if you get educated to the point where you're like, okay, they have a solid plan in place, should the worst come to pass, that would be, to me, just thinking about that's like, all right, if I knew exactly what would happen, and I saw the seriousness in these people's faces, and if Lieutenant Harper's showing up, like I have faith in my first responders, right? Knowing that would allow me a small bit of grace to perhaps not act rashly, because I can tell you, I would just, being as close as I am to my kids' elementary school, it would be almost impossible in the absence of that to not go. But knowing it's like, okay, if Shawn's on the way, like he's going to be far better than I am, and I'm just going to get in his way. So get a hold of your school.
Yeah. Well, and also get a hold of your first responder, the agency that serves your community, and ask them, speak with people who are actually working directly with the school. And hey, what are you guys doing? What does your response look like?
Right.
How are you guys working with the schools? I think a lot of times it's assumed, but I really believe in like engage with your first responder community, engage with your schools, educate yourself, and make sure that you truly understand what's going on when we're dealing with emergencies, because again, that is our most vulnerable population. That is our most important population. Everybody's important, but the kids in those situations are our number one focus. And we're dealing with different types of emergencies every single day in our schools. Some are very low level. Fortunately, we've been pretty fortunate over the years to not have anything too crazy, but we live in pretty safe communities, and we're able to keep our kids safe.
Is there anything we've missed? We've talked about what will happen on campus. We've talked about what parents can do, what parents should try to refrain from doing. We've talked about what kids can do. We've talked about the role of tech in an emergency. Is there anything we've missed?
I guess I'll continue a little bit on the tech side.
Yes, please.
Because again, we're never quick enough to get information out, because social media is light years ahead of human communication. Right. I would say sit down with your kids as well and discuss this. I think that's really important. Have a discussion because the kids may educate their parents a little bit on what they need if they're in that situation from their parents. Because one of the disruptions that we have is kids putting out during all types of emergencies. They're on Snap, they're on whatever app that they're on,
Right.
and they're putting out very inaccurate information that is getting disseminated to a lot of people, including their parents, because most parents follow their kids' pages. And that inaccurate information is increasing that anxiety and fear in the parents, because there's times where there's been a hall check where that's just getting kids out of the hallways behind locked classroom doors, and the educational process continues,
Sure.
right? And kids will start blasting out, hey, we're in lockdown. There's alleged gunmen on campus. Like kids, they get creative, right? And I don't,
or they may just misunderstand, right?
Absolutely. But that causes a lot of unneeded fear and disruption. So again, I think kids and parents having those discussions and really asking the kids, hey, when you're doing things in regards to school safety, how do you feel? Like, what is your involvement? Do you feel safe? Like, ask those questions, because we need to know, because some classes are better than others, right? We're all humans, and we don't have, it's not perfect. But I think just dialogue sometimes is healthy, because we as parents think we know what our kids need at every single moment of the day. But without having that communication, we may realize that what we think they need is actually what they don't need, because kids are trained. I mean, the kids do a great job in our schools. Like when there's any type of drill that we're doing, they do it better than anybody, because they've been doing it since they were kindergartners.
Sure.
Especially when you get to high school, it's robotic. I mean, they are really good when it comes to being safe.
That's awesome. And that's a really good point. I've seen some of that just misinformation fly around, and then you hear the fallout later, like people losing their minds about it. Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, having that communication with your kid, which is, hey, look, this is not, like not only for your individual family, but for the family surrounding everyone, like that's going to be a horrendous, again, those spread like wildfire. And if you have, 100 parents all of a sudden showing up to a school because they're not getting information, or the school starts getting flooded with phone calls. I mean, and social media, it's such a double-edged sword. You can connect, but like people can connect with anything, and they put out stuff without any obligation of being tied to reality. So that's a great piece. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for articulating this stuff. It's I'm actually going to get a hold of my kids' administrators.
Good.
Yeah, just to know. And again, I think my school district does a very, very good job with it. Obviously you're articulating all these good things, but just knowing, hey, look, what would you do? Like, what is the protocol? What, just tell me, just help me have a little bit more faith so I can sleep more easily. And when I let my kids go during the day, I know that, if something bad comes to pass, then everybody's showing up the right way.
Yeah. And again, technology, we keep going back to that, but we've made a lot of advances. I mean, the days of just walking into a school as a dad or mom, we have made it, we're trying to make castles. We're not trying to make fortresses. We're trying to make castles, right? To where it's still appeasing to look at the school, but you have to have a reason to access our schools. So there's been funding by our governor, and to really help improve school safety in regards to the actual building itself, which has helped a lot. So again, I just said this literally this morning. I sat in a briefing with all of our SROs with Meridian, and I said, talking with you guys, we were talking about a couple of different instances. And I said, standing here in front of you guys as a dad, I feel very safe knowing that my kids are going to schools here and they have you guys as SROs engaging with them, but there to protect them.
Yeah.
I truly feel safe because, again, things happen and I hear from my kids, I hear it on the radio, and I have faith that our first responder community, as well as our schools, are doing everything they can to keep our kids safe. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Shawn.